Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. And you've heard that maybe once or twice before because you've
Yeah.
joined us on this episode, or not on this episode, but on this show.
This
So,
episode too.
yeah, this episode as well. So we have Evan here with us on today's episode. We've had him before. We would like to maybe kind of have a special episode, but before we do that, we'll have you reintroduce yourself just in case we have new listeners.
All right, I'm Evan. I'm a CFI with Thrust Flight. I've been with Thrust Flight, as a student and a CFI for just over 2 years now. I actually just hit my 2-year anniversary with Thrust.
Awesome.
So I'm really happy to be here. It's been a wonderful journey. But yeah,
Since we've had you before, we're gonna go over more of like a checklist of questions about check rides.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of reasons. What I want to put out there is information that's gonna allow people to maybe watch a video like this
Okay.
and then leave after watching this video feeling like I know what to look out for. Things that are often reasons why people fail their check rides.
Yeah.
And I want people to know, like, oh, I can check this off. I feel comfortable with this concept, that concept. That would be kind of my goal here.
Okay.
Is that something you're comfortable with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Well, then we'll kind of just get straight into it. I hope that everyone finds this episode really useful. I think that this will be a pretty informative thing to go on to.
Here's hoping.
Before we get rolling into it, have you failed a check ride before, or are you comfortable
absolutely.
sharing? Oh, yes, you
Yes,
have.
absolutely. I failed a check ride before.
Yeah. Could you maybe tell me a little bit about that? How that felt or how that went?
I mean, it was for me. I'm a bit of a nervous test taker. I'll be completely honest. I'm a little bit of a nervous test taker. So on my check ride, it's my private pilot check ride. I let the nerves get the better of me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like the nerves of the situation, but just the nerves of I hope I pass.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was in the middle of an emergency
Yeah.
and simulated emergency. It was doing great so far. Got my airspeed, got my best place to land, and then just stopped.
Wow.
I just forgot my checklist, forgot my declaring the emergency, et cetera, and I'm just kind of floating down, just getting ready to do my emergency landing, and it just stopped from there. I mean, I did everything else just fine.
Yeah.
I just stopped on the
Wow.
stopped right there.
Is it because you locked into the maneuver and then after like you're getting to where you need to be, you're like, oh wait, there's still other things to do?
I think I mean, I think I just got really hyper focused on getting the plane down, because
Yeah.
it's a simulated emergency.
Right.
So I was just really hyper focused on that, and I just kind of the world closed around me, and I didn't
Yeah.
have my checklist, nothing
Mm.
else. So I mean, it's happened before, so
Okay. Well,
it's
then,
unfortunate, but
yeah.
it happens.
Well, that's why I want to bring it up a little bit. It does happen. Do you you've been a CFI how many? It's about a year now, or
Just about, yeah.
yeah, just about
Just
a year. Would you say that the private is the most often failed check ride, or is it kind of split up? Do you think there's like a heavily weighted check ride?
Honestly, I think a good amount of people struggle with the commercial check ride just
Mm.
because it's introducing some of the maneuvers that are a little bit more difficult to complete, like the power off 180s and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one might be just a little bit more difficult, but I'd say the private's up there because it's your first check ride.
Exactly.
You
That's
don't
fine.
really know what to expect. You're
Yeah.
kind of walking into this the first time, so I totally get that. It's
Yeah.
I'd say maybe commercial or private.
Okay, gotcha. Well, then when I ask some of these questions, maybe there's something that comes up in your brain and says, "Oh, I relate to this one," and so hopefully, there's some room for you to kind of give some of your experience or
Mhm.
anecdotal, pieces of advice, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Either way, let's just see what you have to say about some of these. We'll get rolling right into one of the first reasons why people may fail their check ride,
All right.
which is knowing your study materials or
Yeah.
your check ride documents.
Absolutely.
And maybe I'll just let you dive into that. But
Mhm.
what's an example of that you could think of?
I mean, first and foremost, the ACS.
Yeah.
A lot of people go into their check ride. Well, I won't say a lot because I don't know for sure, but some people go into their check ride without ever looking at the ACS, and the ACS is your testing document. That is literally what's going to happen on the test.
Yeah.
And even though you've been practicing for 2-3 months or however long you've been practicing, you've been practicing to these standards. You're doing your stalls, you're doing your other maneuvers, ground reference, etc. You're doing all this to specific standards, and you might know what those standards are, but some people don't look at the ACS, or they may not have looked at the ACS, and they see, oh, well, this is where it comes from. Like, this is why my steep turns is plus or minus 100 on the altitude, plus or minus 10 on the heading, etc.
Okay.
That's literally where it's coming from. Or I don't know what the DP is going to ask me. It's like, well, no, you don't technically know what he's going to ask you.
But
He or she's going to ask you, but
Yeah.
it's in a list right here. Like,
Yeah.
you need to look at the ACS. I
Yeah,
mean,
the
it's definitely one
ACS.
of those things.
Gotcha. Would you say so? People say that, right? Look at the. I'm gonna be, play the side of, oh, I don't really know what you mean by looking at the ACS. Like, what? Just memorize the book.
No, you don't have to memorize the book, but
Mhm.
you have to at least, I mean, you have to at least look at it. But
Right.
you're kind of get a little bit of a flow of like what you're going to be tested
Mm,
over. I mean, it says the applicant must display the information and knowledge to of at least X number of the following or
mhm,
something along those lines. So they could say like navigational systems, weather, and so on and
mm.
so forth. And you need to make sure that you can at least just get enough of each of those things. So you don't want to you don't necessarily have to memorize the book, but you
Mhm.
need to use the test to take the test, if that makes sense, right?
Yes. If I was in that position and I hear that being said, I guess I would look at it and then I would see different ways I could break it down, like you said, weather
Yeah.
and maneuvers or emergency and
Yep.
safety, things like that. And then try to make sure I can wrap my brain around each section of it, at least be able to sit there and say to someone else,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
here's what's going on. Here's the concept. Here's why it matters for aviation.
Hmm.
And maybe that's a good way to kind of get your head wrapped around it.
Yeah.
Uh, but you're saying, so are you saying that DPEs, like anything they're gonna ask,
Hmm.
is basically can be found in that book in the sense that that's sort of like that is your study material.
Yeah. No, it's literally that's it. That is what they're
Yeah.
going to ask you. I mean, that's
Cool.
exactly how it's set up. I mean, some DPs even have their own little list of things from the ACS that they've made to kind of build a flow for their own check ride.
Mm,
Some DPs even do that.
yeah.
And yeah, it's just there's no reason not to look at the ACS. It's literally the document you are being tested. That is your rubric, so to speak.
I guess what I'm also wondering is, do you feel like this is an underutilized tool, even though it's so obvious?
It's
Yeah.
easy to look over because
Yeah.
again, you've been practicing everything in the ACS with your ground studies and your flight training. You've been practicing everything in the ACS, but you may not have actually looked at the ACS. So
Mm,
you need to at least look at it.
yeah.
That way you can put two and two together and be like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen, so on and so forth.
Okay.
I mean, it's and you can look at the steep turn sections like, oh, well, there's the criteria for the steep turns that I've been doing this entire time, so that's where it comes from. And it's like, oh, well, there's this section here that says you need to pick a visual reference point, or you should pick a visual reference point.
Yeah.
Oh, I should probably make sure I'm doing that, and things like
Okay.
that. So
That makes
it's
sense then, because someone could assume, and that's why I asked. So, are you saying that someone could assume, since what they've been working on with their CFI and their peers in terms of maneuvers and ground knowledge,
mhm.
since what they've been working on is from the ACS, they could assume that, oh, I kind of know the ACS, but looking at it's going to give you a different perspective, right?
Right. It's just going to kind of
Yeah.
fill any gaps that you might have as well. But I mean, you definitely need to look at it.
Okay,
You
gotcha.
definitely need to look at it.
The reason number two is what I want to roll into. Maybe you have something to say about this one, but people say that they may fail their check ride due to poor checklist discipline.
Yeah,
What does that
absolutely.
mean, really?
I mean, it's one of those things where Thrust tries to build flows.
Hmm.
So we're kind of working through the all of the emergency procedures through a flow,
Yeah.
and then verifying with our checklist, kind of going back and verifying. But yeah, that lack of checklist usage will absolutely get you a fail because I mean that's your grounding point, so to speak. That's what's
Mm.
going to help you make sure you don't forget anything.
Right.
Because you've done the flow 1,000 times, but what if it's different?
Right. And that's another thing about it. I mean, I feel like I've had a couple conversations around like checklists and
Mhm.
flows and like what we're doing and how we're training that and how to practice lately. So as you've been working with students, what would you say is some of the best practices for making sure you don't mess up your checklist?
I'd say the three things for new students coming in, like trying to practice checklist usage and just kind of building that flow. Three very important things: chair fly, chair fly, chair fly. I'm dead serious. Like that's when you're first getting into this, you're unfamiliar with like the layout of the controls or the plane or and anything like that.
Yeah.
Chair fly, chair fly, chair fly. I mean,
Yep.
you need to know where things are at to build the flow, but that checklist is always there to just kind of help ground you, make sure you're not forgetting anything, or if you've encountered something you've not yet encountered, it's there to kind of help guide you along through that process as well.
Gotcha. So in the chair flying practice, um, should you be able, like, what are some things you think should be like you should be able to check off? With like kind of memorizing or being able to imagine where things are, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, you can get like a blown up poster
Mhm.
of the cockpit of whatever your plane you're flying in, and you can even just find a picture on Google. And actually, one of the instructors, he actually recommended this to me as well.
Yeah.
It was a great idea, but he actually got a picture of the cockpit on Google
Yeah.
and just cast it to his TV.
Yeah.
And he just sit in front of his TV, just going through the flows, and I thought, I was like, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just doing that and kind of just familiarizing yourself with the layout of the cockpit kind of helps build that speed as well
Okay.
for
Gotcha.
those flows.
One of our reasons over here that I have, if I'm looking, it says nervousness and overthinking is one of our reasons.
Oh, absolutely.
For why people
Absolutely.
are gonna fail a check ride.
Yep.
You could be so well prepared. You can be the top student.
Hmm.
But I mean, you're not immune to nervousness and overthinking,
Oh,
and
never.
you can still
No.
fail even if you are a top student because of that.
Absolutely.
I mean, is there something you would have to say about that?
I mean, it's one of those things where I had a hard time really accepting it, but the DPE wants you to pass as much as you do.
Right.
Honestly, it's 99 times out of 100 they want you to pass as much as you do.
Mhm.
They really do, and they really work for it, and they're usually trying to throw you a bone if you're ever hitting a point where you're struggling. Now, obviously, it is a pass fail criteria,
Absolutely.
but they are trying to work with you on these
Mhm.
things. But there's only so much they can do, which is why it's better to come into these over prepared,
Mhm.
well over prepared. So you definitely don't want to definitely don't want to forget any documents. You
Mhm.
definitely want to make sure you've studied everything that you can,
Mhm.
but and within reason, because overstudying is a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the DPE wants you to pass.
Yeah.
They want you to pass, and it took me about 3 check rides to fully realize that, or
Yeah.
to I guess to accept that.
Are you and do you say that because maybe the idea is that the DPE is can be a little intimidating and that
Oh,
could
absolutely.
probably make people
And
nervous?
I think personally, I think they're oftentimes just trying to put the pressure on. They're just trying to put the pressure on. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sure they might just be told in their classes or something like
Mhm.
that, like, hey, put the pressure on these students when they're doing these examinations. Like,
Mhm.
I'm sure that's what it is. But
Right.
again, I'm not a DP. I don't know. But
Well, to your point, I don't think that's far off. I was talking to Wally, and then I
yeah,
think talking to someone else. Uh, I've talked to a couple of people who are DPEs, and then the pilots as well that are in the airlines. But it is kind of a thing that they do want to put the pressure on you,
oh
and
yeah, absolutely.
I think people think that means that they want them to fail.
Mhm.
But I think from Wally's perspective, without me even having to ask, he kind of went there and explained. He said that he would want you have to be prepared even in a situation like you have to be prepared for anything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're gonna be under pressure flying a
Oh,
plane full of
absolutely,
passengers. You
absolutely.
know, we want you to be prepared to be able to fly under pressure. You know, not
Hmm.
just when you're comfortable, and you know you should be confident regardless. And
Exactly.
so it's not that they want you to fail. I mean, they don't want it to be easy for you.
Hmm.
They just want to make sure that
Yep.
you are confident. You don't want your confidence to be reliant on how comfortable you are.
Oh yeah,
So.
and it even boils down to one of the fundamentals of instruction back in the day. And I know a lot of CFIs are going to roll their eyes here. The intensity, bringing that intensity, because I mean the DPE, I mean they are examining you, but bringing that intensity uh, brings that authenticity to the
Mhm.
testing scenario as
Exactly.
well.
I think we talked about this.
Yeah.
So, examiners aren't looking for perfection.
No.
They want to see that you're competent and safe, and you don't try to overimpress them. Is
Right.
kind of the point.
That's the thing about
Yeah.
DPs is it's I don't know that I don't know that you're going to impress them a whole lot. Now I could be wrong because I just I generally have this
But you have a
idea
point.
that DPEs have, I mean, they've got thousands of hours, they've seen it all, they've done it all.
Hmm.
Um, I would imagine they're pretty hard to impress, so I'm not necessarily trying to impress
Mm,
them when I go into a check ride. I'm just trying to pass.
right.
I want to do well and I want to pass. Um, but I mean, with the ground knowledge, you might be able to impress them sometimes.
Yeah.
But and again, that might be taking a bit of a negative stance on it.
Well, and you know, I'm glad I can participate here in the conversation, but um, you know, I back to the confidence thing. Maybe people are expecting perfection from themselves,
Oh, absolutely,
and
absolutely.
yeah, and which isn't really the point probably of the
Yeah.
check ride, because yeah, it's not the point of the check ride, right?
And the problem is when they do anything less than perfect, when they're expecting perfection from themselves, they immediately start to lose confidence. Immediately. And
Exactly.
it can become a snowball effect for a lot of them. So it's like it's not
Mm,
perfection. You can and maybe I can't say this for all DPs, but there are some where you can fall out of standards just a little bit, maybe a couple seconds and fix it.
mm-hmm.
Um and then bring it back and save the rest of the check ride. I mean, it's not gonna it shouldn't I don't think it's gonna be the be all end all. Again,
Right.
I can't speak for all DPs, but
Right. And maybe the DPE maybe a DPE could easily argue that that showed confidence that they were
Right.
able to make sure.
Yeah, you recognize that you were out of standards and you fixed it. That's another thing there is they're looking for is that you're actually able to correct your mistakes and not just let it sit there.
Yeah.
Just doing a steep turn down and down and down.
And that is one of our reasons as well.
Yeah.
And before I move on to that real quick, the idea that you would I think what's an alternative to going into a check ride looking for perfection.
I think the best piece of advice I could give there, and again, this is what I can think of off the top of my head. Uh, uh, Go in sticking to your training. Know what you know. I mean, you've done this before. You've done this before, and I tell students all the time, I need you to have the confidence in you that I have in you. When I'm sending you to this EOC, this check ride, whatever it may be, it's like I need you to be confident or as confident in yourself as I am in you, because you've done this before. You've done all of these things before. You just got to do it one more time.
Right.
Done.
Right.
And it's one of those things where just stick to your training, stick to what you've already done with. And if you need to imagine that your instructor's in the right seat instead, by all means, do it. It's just whatever helps you feel a little bit more comfortable in order to just focus on the flight.
Exactly.
Yep.
Afterwards, there's still a debrief with the
absolutely.
DPE, right?
Yeah.
And do they give feedback?
Oh yeah, no, they absolutely give feedback.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you if there are any unsatisfactory items. I mean, you're obviously going to hear it as soon as that you get to that point, but they'll tell you what they might have been looking for or what they were trying to lead you into or anything like that. You're going to get a debrief on all this stuff.
Worst case scenario, you can really look at this as like an opportunity to perform under the most pressure you've had so far.
Yeah.
Right. And a learning experience at that.
Yeah.
I guess
worst case scenario.
Yeah. I get the reason I say that though is because, of course, you don't want to fail your check ride, but I mean, you're getting to put yourself to the test. I feel like you could maybe look at it in a way that you could find some excitement in it about like, oh, I'm finally going to like know if I'm actually as good as I need to be for this check ride.
The excitement, yes, but not necessarily excitement for failure.
No, absolutely not.
No, I would be excited to take a check ride.
Yeah.
I would want to take a check ride. I want to demonstrate that knowledge now.
And that's what I mean, an opportunity to demonstrate.
Now I want to show you what I know.
Exactly. I guess maybe if you make that a goal before a check ride, hey, I want to be excited to show them what I do know and what I've been practicing.
Right.
If you can find a way to get to that mindset, I feel like there's a lot more room to perform well.
Oh, absolutely. So, absolutely.
I saw someone talking about that though, like, hey, this is at very least a learning opportunity. You don't want to go in there thinking you're gonna fail. That's different. Maybe talk to your CFIs.
You want to go in there with confidence, because that confidence is going to change. It could change everything for you.
Okay,
honestly,
great.
And you want to go in excited and be like, yes, I'm going to take this test. I'm going to knock it out. This is going to be great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I hope for everyone. So for the record, for anyone listening, like I really hope that you can find a way to go into your check ride with confidence. Now, I do want to go back to that mistake thing because I really like that point that we came up with. Oftentimes, people don't know how to handle their mistakes very well. And that, like, it can cause like a snowball effect. I mean, I think what we have written down is examiners don't expect perfection again, but they do expect you to recover gracefully. Panicking after mistakes is worse than the mistake itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this is just a simple maneuver you might be making a mistake on. If you start panicking for that, what if you come across an actual emergency? Granted, you have a DP in the plane in your right seat with you for X number of thousands of hours, but the idea is, if you're panicking for just falling out of standards on just a simple maneuver, then what's going to happen when you're actually undergoing a real emergency?
Right.
What's going to happen then?
Right.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, at least that's what I could think is. I
agree.
How I could rationalize that is. That's my first thought. Is if I was a DP and I see some student panicking over,
it's like they're way too nervous.
Yeah. It's like, well, you kind of need to get a grip.
Yeah. Honestly, and that's one of the toughest things. And I guess to maybe if anyone's experiencing that, I mean, you said you were kind of nervous and you maybe felt in some ways. Did you feel like you made a mistake and it just kind of got worse after that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I was slightly. That's the thing is I was slightly uncoordinated when I was on my takeoff and during my cruise, and when I was just slightly uncoordinated.
Yeah.
And my DP had said it like, get coordinated.
And you're like,
and it's just one of those things where it was just hammering down on me, and it's, again, one thing led to another. But I mean, I got through all my maneuvers, but it's just that one thing where I just hyper focused on, okay, we're in an emergency. I need to get the plane down. Let's go land in this field.
Yeah. I've done that. I've done that sort of thing before where I'm like, oh, I'm just like, it's like a train wreck, like one cart after another,
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh, I made a mistake here. Now I'm like, it keeps doubling down
Yep.
instead of just taking a moment. And then like, you know what? Let's just get back to square one real quick.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't have every opportunity to do that in a plane, but like still, maybe there's a moment to be like, okay, let's relax and
Yep.
do what the next right step is.
And another thing is being able to just take it and move on.
Exactly.
Just
That's
take it and move forward.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
I mean, just take it and move forward. Just press on with the rest of it.
And
All right.
do you think that in that moment, maybe for you or for other students, I don't know, that maybe a lot of that pressure, a lot of times that pressure isn't even that much that you don't know how to do it. It's that you're just nervous about the validation
Yeah,
from the
no,
DPE.
and I mean, you do know how to do it.
Yeah,
You've done it dozens of times before the check ride. Like you've
right.
practiced this methodically, even.
Is it?
You practiced and practiced
Yeah,
and practiced. It just happens
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
and that's one of those things where students let those nerves, myself included, they let those nerves get to them,
Yeah.
and it's
It's almost like it's almost because you're like performing in front of a professional. You're
right.
like, oh, they're gonna judge me
Yeah.
or think I'm lame
Well,
or something like
that's
that.
kind of well, it's kind of how it was for me. Is I look up to a lot of DPUs because I
Exactly.
mean
Yeah,
these guys, these
you're the
people have
guy.
tons of experience, tons of experience. So
Mhm.
it's like I want to make sure that my thing was I was wanting to make sure that I was good enough.
Yeah,
And I was worried about not being good enough, and
yeah.
that worry right there got me into the
Right.
the category of not being good enough that one
Yes,
time. So
and then
it's
furthermore, the only thing
yeah,
that's gonna make you good enough, because the only thing they care about is hitting those points that they're gonna test you on.
yeah,
Like, I think some people are like, they might not think I'm a good pilot. Well, what makes someone a good pilot? And just be sure about that. And that
mhm,
is these things. And if you know those things, then
yeah,
you can let your ego go. You can let little things go.
yep,
Just do what you know you got to do.
yep.
So, I can see myself getting nervous. That's why I'm just thinking about all the different things I could do
It
if I
used to
was
be
in that
nerve
situation.
wracking, but then
Yeah.
later on down the road, I started getting excited for check rides.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like
And now that we're going through all these points, it sounds so almost what's the word negative? Like hopefully this doesn't do the opposite to
oh
where
no 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 no.
someone's like, oh, there's a lot of things to be nervous about or whatever. No,
Well, there's
just
really not though.
yeah,
There's really not. It's things you've already practiced. It's
yeah.
not anything you have to worry about.
Exactly. I'm hoping that
Yep.
people when they hear any of these things, they're like maybe they just pay attention to what they relate to and they hear a piece of insight about it.
Yeah.
More than anything. Hey, if this thing sounds like something you would never worry about, well then don't worry about it.
Yeah. I
So
mean, you didn't worry about it the last 15 flights with your instructor. Why worry about it now?
exactly my point. Yes, exactly my point. Okay, so let's just move on to we've got most of these done already. Is this one familiar with you? Insufficient understanding of the systems. When I say systems, things like fuel and electrical,
Yeah.
engine operations, things like that about the
Um,
plane.
I personally did pretty well on systems.
Mhm.
But I mean, it is something that that escapes some students is just knowing the systems of your airplane.
Mhm.
You're testing in this airplane. You need to know this airplane, so
Mhm.
you need to know how the systems work. So students are expected to know how the fuel system works. They're expected to know at the very least how just an alternator works or things like that.
Right.
So there are some expectations there, and I mean, car buffs have a bit of an advantage there, so they already know
Right.
like how an alternator works or just roughly how a fuel system works.
And that's kind of what I was wondering is because I imagine a lot of people don't know about their own cars, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it maybe people who enter into aviation um sometimes they could get to I love flying, but I don't know that much about the planes really. That's
Yeah.
probably not that uncommon, right? Or
I mean, it's not uncommon at all to not know a whole lot about the plane,
yeah,
because I mean, it's an airplane. You don't. How often do you study an airplane when you're not in aviation?
exactly.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of enthusiasts and hobbyists, but
And it's a
point
lot of times
being
they find their
is
way into aviation.
right,
So,
right,
but
but point being is these resources are available.
mhm,
You've got the POH, you've got other things,
mhm,
but these resources are available, and you are expected to study these resources up to the point of your check ride. So it's
mhm,
one of those things where yes, students kind of have trouble with their systems and whatnot.
right.
Not all the time, but sometimes they do. But
Yeah.
you are expected to know the systems to an extent.
Gotcha. And I
Yeah.
don't know if this is extensive or not. Is there like a few bullet points to hit for yourself that you would think you would, hey, here's start looking into these systems.
Um, Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, yes and no. I mean, for our Archer specifically, we've got diagrams, electrical diagrams, and fuel system diagrams, etc. We've
Hmm.
got those diagrams and whatnot in our POH. Like everything that we would need is in that POH for
Yeah.
the system. So I'll have students bookmark about 5 or 6 pages,
Mm-hmm.
just with diagrams and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of explain how these things work,
Mm-hmm.
and just ways to help them memorize them as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't say there's it's like, oh, this is my go-to bullet point. Well, I guess those 5 bookmarks or so would be my go-to
You're
bullet
right.
points, but yeah, I mean, just knowing roughly how these systems work, and
Mm-hmm.
then more specifically how the Archer has its systems implemented, or our planes with the Archers naturally, but
Right.
yeah,
But
how
whoever
our
is flying, whatever they
right,
are.
with you could be
Yeah.
a Skyhawk or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
how these systems are implemented.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's going to be in the POH, or it should
Mm-hmm.
be in the POH. But yeah, to study those systems and just have, at the very least, a rough understanding of just how systems work in general.
Right.
And then once you're getting into it, really start to study how your systems work, because this
Okay.
is your airplane. You are flying this plane. You're being tested on it. You need
Right.
to know how it works.
Here's the thing: we've already covered a lot, but I do want to cover a few more before we go. So we'll see
Okay.
what we can get through here. Uh, Poor risk management. Can you
Well, I guess
imagine?
it would be one of those things where you're not following your checklist if there is an
Mm,
emergency.
yeah.
So that would, one of those things would be poor risk management, or I mean, treating an engine fire like an engine failure, where you're just kind of gliding down
Mm,
instead of getting down to put out the fire. Well, you're just kind of putting yourself in danger there, and
mhm.
again, sometimes that comes down to nerves with some students, but yeah, no, it's one of those things where just making sure you're making the right decision, what actually makes sense. Or
Mm,
for instance, with the engine fire, not cutting off the fuel supplies.
yeah. Like there's a few
Cut,
things there that you
you
should
might
be
have a hard
take.
time putting out the engine fire if you're not cutting out the fuel supplies, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not turning that fuel selector to off. You're not turning off the fuel pump. You're not mixture cut, throttle cut. And again, this is just for our archers,
See, that's
but
like safety.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
just in general.
if you're
Okay,
not cutting that off, you might not put the fire out, and well, there's your first bad decision right there. So it's,
exactly.
again, I guess it goes back to checklists for
Is there any moments
that.
where someone should maybe choose not to land and go around?
Oh, absolutely,
Right, even
absolutely.
even
No,
with the DPE,
this
right?
is why we have those stability calls when we're teaching privates as
Mm-hmm.
well. Is if you're not stable, you should be going around.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes with students, I'll tell them, like, you need to be tested. You have to be tested on a go around, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like where you're coming in for, say, a short field or a soft field, use that go around.
Mm-hmm.
Use that go around to get set back up, and just evaluate what went wrong on the first approach, correct it for the second approach, and then just continue with that correction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're gonna have to be tested on a go around anyway, so you
Right.
might as well use it if you need it,
I will
right?
say that I heard someone say DPEs don't. You're probably, it's, I don't know if it doesn't seem like it's an automatic failure to be doing a go around during a
No,
check ride.
no,
And I don't know if there's a reason why it should be an automatic failure, but I guess
no, no,
my
no, no. Doing a go around at the appropriate time, that's proper risk
yeah, and
management.
I guess that's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
no,
Okay.
yeah, that's proper risk management, is going around when you need to. You absolutely need to be stable on your approach, and practice good judgment for go arounds and whatnot,
Okay, gotcha.
making sure you're stable. So that right there in and of itself is proper risk management. A DP is going to like seeing you go around when you are not stable on the
Okay.
approach. But another thing with the risk management is making that go no go decision. Are you outside of your personal minimums?
Mm-hmm.
Are the conditions of the day within what's acceptable for you to fly?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing with risk
And
management.
it's another thing about knowing your maneuvers and where
Yep.
you're actually supposed to be, not whether or not you can just get
Yeah.
the plane down. There's a difference, and that's part of what you were talking about with your
Yeah.
first check
Yeah.
ride as well. So knowing your ACS, knowing the standards for which your maneuver needs to be performed within,
Yep.
the tolerances, I guess, and yeah, I just wanted to highlight that pretty
Yeah.
much. So, because people think they have to get the plane down.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
very
do the go around.
especially with students,
Yeah.
like even students having that get there itis, because when they're coming back into their home airport, they think, oh, this is my last landing, I need to get it done. Well, then, no, that's not the case.
Hmm.
You just need to focus on getting just nice stable approach,
Yep.
not worrying about getting in. Like, even if it's a busy airport, this is your time to just focus on getting a nice stable approach, nice landing, following the procedures that you've been following, right? Doing what you've been trained to do. Don't rush it,
Exactly, and
right?
I think I would be someone who would fall victim to something like that probably.
And it happens
So yeah,
sometimes. It happens sometimes.
for the second to last, inadequate oral exam preparation. I've heard that the
Okay.
oral exam throws some people for a loop, and it could trip people up if they're not ready to explain concepts or regulations or maybe weather, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that really boils down to preparedness as well.
Hmm.
But this is another thing that I mean, there's literally guides here. You might have one over here.
We have
No,
a
maybe not.
couple.
But
Yeah.
there's plenty of books. There's actually an oral exam guide prep for each rating as well.
Wow.
And I, I fully expect students to look at that to some extent at least, because that's only going to help you. I mean, some DPs probably even take questions out of that they like just to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, again, I can't speak for all DPs, but I guarantee
You would imagine.
one of them at least, one of them probably just pulls a question out of that book and he's like, oh, I like that one.
What does an oral exam look like? If you could, what can they expect?
It's just a bunch of scenario based questions. They're kind of asking to see what you know, how you're going to react with these things, and what your options are, so on and so forth. So you're just given a bunch of scenarios. Oh, you flew into a cloud. What are you going to do here?
Yeah.
Oh, well, here's your plan over to Oklahoma City. You have to divert to here. What can you expect? What do you have to watch out for? Things like that.
Okay.
I mean, those are pretty baseline scenarios, but
that's kind of the idea of what it looks like.
It's roughly the idea of what you can expect, right? Okay. And your instructor should be able to give you some pretty good scenarios there.
to have to try to explain and talk through.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, well then lastly, I like this one because for some people it's counterintuitive, but there's a physical and mental fatigue, and people, you have to eat, sleep, breathe. Aviation is a good tactic for getting through where you want to go. Yeah. But for an exam or for someone who has test anxiety, that might be something that holds you back.
Oh yeah, and it's one of those things where you need to get your sleep. You need to get your sleep.
Yeah.
I get that preparing for an exam is going to take a lot. It is going to take a lot, and a lot of studying, a lot of just preparation for nav log, weight and balance, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to take a lot there just to make sure you're nice and sharp. But you do need to get your sleep.
Yeah.
At the very least.
When I was younger, I hear like get your sleep, and I'm like, why? When I wake up after 3 hours of sleep, I'm good. Like I feel fine. And maybe you do, but you don't know the little things that sneak in there. And I guess I just say that because also I've gotten a little older.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of my age or just because I am that intentional about what I'm doing now, that I want to make sure I'm prepared even when it comes to rest and eating good or something like that.
Absolutely. And it's something I still struggle with sometimes, is getting enough rest. But I mean, it's self-inflicted, we'll be honest.
Exactly, my point. So I guess to some people's point, they may stay up all night cramming, or they may be worried or whatever.
It is very important, obviously, to get enough rest, because this also falls into your personal minimums as a pilot. How many hours of sleep can you operate on, or safely operate on? And you need to make sure you get that rest before you go into a check ride, especially before you go into a check ride.
Yeah.
It's all preparation. It's better to be over prepared once than to have to prepare a second time.
Yes,
right.
I like that. That. It saves. It's a more efficient that way. Better safe than sorry. Same sort of statement. So just look out. I guess from my own experiences, looking out for having enough rest and knowing how that can affect you, and so you're not surprised by it. Things like maybe refocusing, handling mistakes, being agitated. Things like that. Being able to speak better and more clearly. I think those are the things that you benefit when you get enough rest, and don't spend time cramming. If you don't know it already, you probably won't know it by the morning.
You'd be surprised, but yeah,
I hear you.
You're mostly right. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I was always a crammer in school, and I did do well that way. But I wasn't flying a plane, so I'm assuming that better safe.
Well, we can fix that.
Yeah, maybe I'll fly a plane soon. I've been thinking about it.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it seems like it. Maybe I'll do another flight with one of you guys.
There you go.
Hey, we got through a lot of good stuff. I'm
yeah.
hoping that someone was able to follow along with this, and even if it's just a few people, just to get their feet on the ground before their check ride.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm really hoping this helps out. So
I'm happy to I'm always happy to help anyone that's looking for assistance with like check ride or anything really. I mean, it's just always happy to help.
Yeah. Okay.
It's one of those things. Like it's my job to make sure you're prepared. Right?
That's literally what you do. Yeah.
And
that's why I was
job,
excited to ask you, and I know that you would be able to speak about some of these things, and have a little bit of experience. We've talked with you before, and also it was a good opportunity to not maybe double down as much on you as it was the things
Yeah.
So that's good. So we had a great episode. We'll see you guys on the next week. Thank you, Evan, for joining in again. My name is Zach. I'll be your host once we join in on the next episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. See you guys next week.